The African Deep Dive podcast is brought to you by the African Technology Policy Studies Network. This podcast explores how science, technology, and innovation can drive sustainable development and global inclusion in Africa.
Imagine you have the key to unlocking Africa's agricultural potential, right in your hand.
Yeah.
That's kind of the promise of LandPKS. It's this mobile technology that's trying to revolutionize how farmers on the continent manage their land and increase productivity.
Mm-hmm.
In this deep dive, we're going to explore a tech policy brief from the African Technology Policy Studies Network. And we're going to see how LandPKS is blending scientific data with local knowledge to empower these farmers.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that really surprised me is that most of Africa's agricultural growth has come from expanding farmland, not by increasing productivity.
Right.
And that's a critical issue as available land dwindles. So that's where LandPKS is trying to step in.
Yeah, it's fascinating how this technology is sort of tackling this huge challenge.
Yeah.
We hear a lot about the digital divide, but LandPKS is really bridging that gap, and it's providing access to information that was previously out of reach for a lot of farmers.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that a bit. Why is increasing productivity so important in Africa, and how is expanding farmland no longer a sustainable solution?
Well, historically, Africa's agricultural growth has relied on expanding farmland. But with urbanization and land degradation and climate change, we need innovative solutions to make the existing farmland more productive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where LandPKS comes in. It's a suite of mobile apps that was developed by the USDA, ATPS, and other partners. And they're really leveraging the power of mobile technology and cloud computing and GPS and crowdsourced data to help farmers make the most of their land.
Yeah.
So there are two key apps that we're going to be talking about today, LandInfo and LandCover.
So imagine you're a farmer in rural Kenya and you want to know the best way to manage your land. You just pull out your phone and open a LandPKS app and boom, you've got instant access to all this site-specific data on soil, rainfall, growing seasons, all tailored to your exact location.
What's so revolutionary about it is it's hyper-local and it's relevant to each individual farmer. It takes into account things like the topography, the soil texture, and even observable soil properties that the farmer can input themselves.
Wow.
And provides data like temperature, rainfall, soil, water storage capacity, and growing season length. It's like having an agricultural expert right in your pocket.
I know. I was reading about the LandInfo app and how it can even estimate things like, the amount of water that the soil can store for the plants. It's like having a mini soil lab right there on your phone.
Exactly. That kind of information is absolutely critical for making informed decisions about irrigation, choosing the right crops, and even which land management practices will prevent degradation.
Right.
It's all about empowering farmers with the knowledge to make their land more resilient, especially in the face of climate change.
And it's not just about individual farmers, right? This data has a ripple effect across regions and even globally.
Yeah, think about it. This technology is creating a massive, globally geo-referenced database. Scientists and researchers can use this to study land potential and track changes over time and even develop better agricultural strategies. It's crowdsourcing data for the good of the entire planet.
That's incredible. So can you walk me through what using LandPKS actually looks like for a farmer out in the field?
Okay, so let's say you want to know the best place to plant a certain crop. You would open the LandInfo app, and using your phone's GPS, it will pinpoint your location. And then you just follow the prompts inputting information about your soil. And if you're not sure about something, there are even helpful videos right in the app to guide you.
Wow. So it's designed to be really user-friendly, even for someone who might not be a tech whiz.
Precisely. And once you've put in the information, the app does the rest. It pulls data from global sources, combines it with your local observations, and gives you a detailed analysis of your land's potential, including recommendations. It might suggest specific crops that would thrive in your land's conditions, or offer guidance on techniques to improve water retention.
So it's not just about knowing what your land is, it's about knowing what it could be. It's about unlocking its hidden potential.
Exactly. And that's where we start to see the impact. Increased productivity, improved resilience, and ultimately a more sustainable and food-secure future.
There's also the LandCover app, which is the other part of the LandPKS suite. This one uses a simple stick method to assess vegetation cover. You literally use a stick to measure things like bare ground and vegetation height.
It's ingenious in its simplicity. And the data it collects is crucial for monitoring rangeland health, especially in areas where livestock grazing is prevalent.
So imagine you're a pastoralist herding cattle across these vast grasslands. You can track changes in the vegetation over time, identify areas that are becoming overgrazed, and make decisions about where to move your livestock to keep the land healthy.
That's a perfect example of how this technology blends traditional practices with modern data analysis. It's about empowering people with the tools they need to make informed decisions, whether they're a smallholder farmer or a nomadic herder.
But of course, technology alone isn't enough. There are policy considerations that need to be addressed to ensure the success of LandPKS, right?
Absolutely. The brief highlights several key policy areas that need attention. Things like creating an environment that fosters innovation, developing national e-agriculture policies, and raising awareness about this technology.
Okay, let's break those down. What does fostering innovation in this context actually mean?
It means ensuring affordable mobile broadband access, especially in rural areas. It also means creating supportive regulations and offering incentives for smartphone adoption.
Yeah, because even with this groundbreaking technology, without the basic infrastructure and access, it can't reach its full potential.
Exactly. And then there's the need for national e-agriculture policies. A lot of African countries have policies for e-health or e-governance, but they haven't really caught up to the idea of specifically addressing the integration of ICTs in agriculture.
Yeah, agriculture is such a vital sector in many African economies. It makes sense that it needs its own dedicated policy framework to ensure that technology is being used effectively.
Exactly. And this policy needs to be developed collaboratively, with input from farmers, policymakers, researchers, everyone involved.
Speaking of stakeholders, the brief also emphasizes the importance of engaging end users from the very beginning. That means involving farmers and policymakers in the development process itself.
This is crucial because it ensures that the technology is actually meeting the real needs of the people who will be using it. And plus, it builds trust and buy-in, which is essential for adoption. People are far more likely to embrace a technology if they've had a hand in creating it.
The brief also mentions the need to support mobile service infrastructure. What does that entail?
This is where public-private partnerships become essential. Expanding ICT infrastructure, particularly in rural areas, requires significant investment. So we need to see collaboration between governments and telecommunication companies and even international development organizations.
Yeah, it's like having a fancy smartphone with no signal. It's essentially useless.
Exactly. We need to ensure that reliable and affordable internet access reaches even the most remote corners of the continent if we want technologies like LandPKS to truly thrive.
This is a big task, but the potential rewards are huge. This technology has the power to revolutionize African agriculture, but it's going to take a collective effort to make that vision a reality.
And that's what's so exciting about this. It's not just about technology, it's about people. It's about empowering individuals and building communities and working together to create a brighter future for agriculture in Africa.
Well said. And speaking of a brighter future, I want to explore how LandPKS can contribute to global knowledge and research. The brief talks about that. Let's delve into that a bit further.
What's really remarkable is that LandPKS isn't just about helping individual farmers. It's about creating this vast network of data that can benefit the entire world.
It's like a global brain for agriculture, with information flowing from the field level all the way up to international research institutions. Imagine scientists being able to study soil conditions and land management practices across diverse ecosystems, all thanks to data collected by farmers using their mobile phones.
It's incredible.
This data can be used for so many things: developing new crop varieties, improving climate models, and even predicting and mitigating the impacts of drought or land degradation.
Exactly. It's about harnessing the power of collective knowledge to address some of the most pressing challenges facing agriculture, both in Africa and globally.
But with such a massive amount of data being collected, there are also important considerations around data privacy and security.
Oh, that's a crucial point. We need to ensure that farmers' personal information is protected and that the data is being used ethically and responsibly.
It's a balancing act. We want to maximize the benefits of this data sharing, but we also need to safeguard individual rights and privacy.
Absolutely. And this is where clear guidelines and transparency and community engagement are paramount. We need to build trust and ensure that farmers feel comfortable participating in this data revolution.
Well said. I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground, from the nuts and bolts of how LandPKS works to the broader policy and ethical considerations. When we come back, we'll be exploring some real-world examples of LandPKS in action and discussing the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. So stay tuned.
You're listening to the African Deep Dive podcast. We would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, suggestions, and comments via social media or email. Thank you for tuning in and stay with us for more insightful conversations.
Welcome back. I'm really eager to hear about how LandPKS is actually being used out in the field.
Yeah, there's some amazing stories about how this technology is making a real difference. One really compelling example comes from a pastoralist community in northern Kenya. They were really struggling with overgrazing, which was leading to land degradation and even conflict over, dwindling resources.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge for a lot of pastoralist communities. So how did LandPKS actually make a difference? Well, they started using the Land Cover app to map vegetation across their grazing lands. And with that data, they could identify areas that were becoming depleted and make informed decisions about rotating their livestock to give the land time to recover.
So like a simple tool had a big impact on these traditional practices. Did it work?
The results were remarkable. Not only did the land begin to regenerate, but conflicts between herders actually decreased. They had this shared understanding of the rangeland's health, thanks to the data.
It's amazing how data can empower communities to manage resources more sustainably and peacefully. It sounds like LandPKS isn't just about technology, it's having a social impact too.
You're absolutely right. Another really great example is a smallholder farming community in Namibia. They were dealing with really low crop yields because of poor soil fertility.
Yeah, soil fertility is a major issue in many parts of Africa. How do they use LandPKS?
They used the LandInfo app to assess their soil and get recommendations for improving its fertility. They learned about composting and crop rotation and even what specific types of fertilizer would work best.
So the app was translating data into actionable advice.
Exactly. And farmers who used the recommendations saw a significant increase in their crop yields. This meant more food for families and more income and a more resilient livelihood.
These stories are so inspiring. It sounds like LandPKS is delivering on its promise. But, no technology is perfect. What are some of the challenges?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is the digital divide. Not everyone has access to smartphones or reliable internet, especially in rural areas.
So how do we ensure that LandPKS reaches those farmers who need it the most?
It's a multifaceted challenge that requires a combination of solutions. We need to advocate for investment in ICT infrastructure, especially in those remote areas. This is where public-private partnerships are really crucial. We need that joint effort from governments and telecom companies and development organizations to kind of bridge that gap.
And even if you have the infrastructure, not everyone is comfortable with smartphones or complex apps. How do we make LandPKS more accessible for those who might not be tech savvy?
Well, we can design the apps with simplicity and user-friendliness in mind. Incorporating visual aids and tutorials and even offline functionality can make a big difference.
What about language? Are the apps available in multiple local languages?
Oh, that's incredibly important. LandPKS is already available in several languages, and there are ongoing efforts to expand that. We have to make sure language isn't a barrier to this vital information.
Another challenge I see is trust. Some farmers might hesitate to rely on technology or share their data. How do we build that trust and encourage adoption?
Building trust is essential, and it begins with engaging communities from the very beginning. We need to involve them in the development process and address their concerns head-on.
Farmers need to understand how their data is being used and that it's protected and that they ultimately benefit.
Exactly. Sharing success stories and showcasing the positive impacts LandPKS is having on other farmers is key.
It's about not just telling. Working with local partners like extension workers and community leaders is also really critical.
Oh, you're right. Those trusted intermediaries really bridge the gap between technology and tradition. They can explain the benefits of LandPKS and provide training and address any concerns.
It's a community effort. It's not about imposing technology. It's about working together to integrate it into those existing systems and practices.
That's where the magic happens. Blending traditional knowledge with modern technology creates something truly transformative.
Okay, so let's talk about how LandPKS fits into the bigger picture of agricultural development in Africa. We've talked about its impact on individuals and communities, but what about the broader scale?
Well, LandPKS aligns with the goals of sustainable agricultural intensification. This basically means increasing productivity on existing farmland while minimizing environmental impact.
So doing more with less.
Exactly. LandPKS helps farmers make informed decisions about things like crops and fertilization and water management by providing really precise, location-specific information.
So helping farmers optimize resources and make the most of their land without harming the environment.
Right. Africa's population is growing rapidly and food demand is going to increase. We need to find ways to produce more food without expanding farmland and putting more pressure on resources. LandPKS is a solution to that challenge. Making existing farmland more productive and resilient is exactly what we need.
Especially in a world facing climate change and resource scarcity.
Absolutely. And that's another important aspect of this. LandPKS can help build resilience to climate change.
Oh, can you tell me more about that? Like, how can a mobile app help with climate resilience?
Well, LandPKS provides farmers with data on rainfall patterns and soil water capacity and growing season length. This information helps them adapt to changing climatic conditions.
So, for example, if a farmer knows rainfall is becoming unpredictable, they can use LandPKS to choose drought-tolerant crops or maybe even change their planting schedule.
Exactly. It's about giving farmers the information they need to make smart decisions when faced with uncertainty. That's crucial for long-term climate resilience.
I also read that LandPKS is being used in some areas to promote conservation agriculture. What is that?
Conservation agriculture is a set of practices that aim to minimize soil disturbance and maintain soil cover and diversify cropping systems. It's all about protecting and building soil health.
And LandPKS helps with this.
Yeah, it can be a valuable tool. For example, the app can help farmers identify areas suitable for no-till farming, which minimizes soil disturbance and conserves moisture. It's about combining traditional knowledge about sustainable farming with modern technology that helps implement those practices more effectively.
This data isn't just for individual farmers, though. It can also inform policy decisions and guide agricultural development at a national and regional level, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Aggregating data from different regions gives policymakers a clearer understanding of soil health and land use patterns, and even the impacts of climate change.
It's like having this real-time dashboard of agriculture, which can help inform policies that support sustainable development and food security.
Precisely. The data can also be used to identify areas most vulnerable to climate change or land degradation, which allows for targeted interventions and investments.
It's about making smarter decisions with data, from the farm level all the way up to the national level.
Exactly. LandPKS is more than just a tool for individual farmers. It's a platform for transformative change across the entire agricultural sector.
LandPKS really is pushing the boundaries of what's possible in agriculture. It's like harnessing technology to address some of the biggest challenges we face, from food security to climate change to sustainable development.
And it's still early days. As more farmers adopt LandPKS and contribute data, the potential for positive impact will only grow.
I'm convinced that LandPKS is something special. It's a shining example of how technology can empower people and improve livelihoods and build a more sustainable future. But we need to talk about potential risks, too. We've talked about all these amazing benefits, but what about, the downsides?
Yeah, with any new technology, there's always that chance of unintended consequences. One risk is that the data collected by LandPKS could be misused or misinterpreted.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, if the data shows that a certain area is highly productive, it could lead to land grabs or pressure to convert that land to commercial agriculture, potentially displacing smallholder farmers. We need to remember that data is just a tool.
Yeah, it can be used for good or for bad. It all depends on who controls it and how it's interpreted.
Exactly. Another potential risk is that relying on technology could lead to a decline in traditional knowledge and practices. If farmers become too dependent on a mobile app, they might lose touch with generations of accumulated wisdom.
Yeah, we need to make sure LandPKS is complementing traditional knowledge, not replacing it.
Absolutely. Another potential risk is that the benefits of LandPKS might not be distributed fairly.
What do you mean?
Well, if only a segment of the population has access to smartphones and the internet, then those who are already marginalized women, the elderly, those in remote areas, might be left behind.
So we need to make sure that access to technology and its benefits is inclusive and equitable.
Exactly. It requires a conscious effort to address the digital divide and ensure that everyone has the opportunity to benefit from LandPKS.
It sounds like LandPKS has this incredible potential, but also some real risks that need to be addressed.
We need to be mindful of those potential downsides and work proactively to ensure that this technology is used ethically and responsibly.
And I think that's a great point to wrap up this part of the discussion. When we come back, we'll explore ways to maximize the benefits of LandPKS while minimizing the risks. So stay tuned. We're back and ready to tackle that big question. How do we make sure LandPKS reaches its full potential while avoiding those potential pitfalls that we talked about,
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. It's not just about the technology itself, but the whole ecosystem surrounding it.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What are some of those key ingredients for success?
Well, strong partnerships are going to be absolutely crucial. This isn't something that, any one organization or sector can really achieve alone.
So we're talking about collaboration between, governments, research institutions, NGOs, private companies, and even the farmers themselves.
Exactly. Each stakeholder kind of brings unique expertise and resources to the table. Governments can create supportive policies, research institutions can offer scientific backing, NGOs can handle community outreach, and private companies can really drive innovation and investment.
It's like a giant puzzle where every piece is essential. But even with all the pieces in place, there's still the challenge of reaching, those who are most marginalized. How do we ensure that LandPKS benefits everyone, not just those who are already connected and, comfortable with technology?
Yeah, that's where targeted interventions are needed. We need programs that are specifically designed to reach women, the elderly, those living in remote areas, and really anyone facing barriers to accessing technology.
So things like, digital literacy training and providing access to affordable smartphones and even maybe developing versions of the app that can work offline or in local languages.
Exactly. It's about removing those barriers and creating a level playing field. But it's not just about access. It's also about relevance. We need to make sure that LandPKS is tailored to the specific needs and contexts of different communities.
Yeah, a one-size-fits-all approach isn't going to work. What works for a pastoralist community in Kenya might not be appropriate for a smallholder farmer in Namibia.
You're absolutely right. We need to be sensitive to those local cultures and traditions and agricultural practices. That means involving communities in the design and adaptation of the technology, making sure it truly meets their needs.
So it's about co-creation, not just handing over technology. What role can farmers actually play in shaping the future of LandPKS?
Well, farmers are the ultimate end users, so their feedback is absolutely crucial. We need to create ways for them to share their experiences, suggest improvements, and even contribute to developing new features.
It's this continuous feedback loop. Farmers are using the technology, they're providing input, and the technology kind of evolves to better serve their needs.
Exactly. That's how we ensure that LandPKS remains relevant and effective and truly transformative. But there's another really important piece of this puzzle, and that's data governance.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What are some of those key considerations around data governance when it comes to LandPKS?
We need clear guidelines of protocols for how data is collected and stored and shared and used.
So things like data privacy and security and ownership and transparency.
Absolutely. Farmers need to know how their data is being used and have control over how it's shared. We also need to prevent misuse of the data, like for land grabbing or exploitation.
It's about building trust and ensuring that the data is used ethically and responsibly. How do we achieve that?
Well, one approach is to create data cooperatives or trusts where farmers can collectively own and manage their data. This would give them more control and bargaining power.
That's interesting. So data becomes a commodity that farmers can sell or lease.
Exactly. Another approach is to use blockchain technology for data security and transparency. Blockchain creates this permanent record of how data is accessed and used, so it makes it much harder to tamper with or misuse the data.
It's like a digital safety net for farmers' data. Even with all these safeguards in place, there's still the question of who benefits from this data. We've talked about the benefits to individual farmers and communities, but what about the bigger picture? Who else might gain from the information collected by LandPKS?
That's a complex question. Governments and research institutions and even private companies, could potentially profit from this data.
So how do we ensure those profits are shared fairly and that the farmers who are actually generating the data are also reaping the rewards?
That's a crucial question. One approach is to create revenue sharing models where farmers receive compensation for the data they contribute.
So data becomes like a commodity that farmers can sell or lease?
Exactly. Another approach is to use the data to develop new products or services that directly benefit farmers, like personalized crop insurance or access to microloans.
So it's about creating this virtuous cycle where the data generated by farmers is used to create solutions that empower them even further.
Precisely. That's how we ensure that LandPKS is not just a technological innovation, but, a force for social and economic justice.
I love that. It's about technology serving humanity, not the other way around.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to the heart of what LandPKS is all about. It's about more than just data and algorithms. It's about people. It's about empowering farmers and strengthening communities and, building a more sustainable and equitable future for agriculture in Africa.
What an inspiring thought. I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into LandPKS. We've covered a lot, from the technical details to the broader social and ethical implications.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey, and I'm excited to see how this technology continues to evolve and make a difference in the lives of farmers across Africa.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway here is that LandPKS is more than just a tool. It's like a catalyst for innovation and collaboration and empowerment and, positive change in the agricultural sector.
It's a great reminder that technology has the power to transform lives when used wisely and ethically.
That's a responsibility we all share, whether we're farmers or policymakers or researchers or just, concerned citizens.
Let's keep the conversation going. Let's continue to explore the potential of LandPKS and work together to build a future where technology serves the needs of humanity and the planet.
Beautifully said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into LandPKS. We hope you've learned something new and been inspired by the possibilities and are ready to join us in shaping the future of agriculture. Remember, the future of agriculture is in our hands, and with tools like LandPKS, we have the power to make it a brighter one.
Thank you for watching. Join us every Thursday for more insightful conversations.